Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Omni at the Movies. Except this isn't something I saw in a theater. Rather, it's something I saw at G-Fest. One of the neat things about G-Fest this year was that there were a couple of brand new independently produced Kaiju and Tokusatsu movies that were screened for the first time, or at least the first time in America, this year. And I'll be getting to each of them with time, but I'm going to start with a movie I already reported on as existing, The Great Buddha Arrival. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is, let me give you a little preface. Back in 1934, there was a movie released in Japan called The Great Buddha Arrival, which was about a famous Buddha statue getting up and walking around Japan, going on sort of an adventure. It's kind of hard to really say what the movie was about because it's a lost film. All copies of it were destroyed during World War II. No one alive has seen it. There are only like a handful of still images and a few brief seconds-long snippets of footage that are still around if you dig deep enough, but the film itself is gone. But it's widely considered to be the first true tokusatsu film. The movie that would go on to inspire things like Godzilla and Super Sentai and Ultraman and Gamera and all of those things we know and love from the genre. It's technically considered to be the first. Unfortunately, it is gone. But a remake has been made. Sort of. I don't want to get into spoilers. It's kind of a remake, kind of a sequel, kind of a meta commentary. It's a very difficult to describe film in terms of its relationship to the original. I'll just simplify it and say it's technically a remake. And it was completely independently produced. It has a lot of recognizable faces from the kaiju genre. And it was shown at G-Fest, and I got a chance to see it. And my feelings on it are, well, just stick with me through to the end so you'll really understand where I'm coming from. So I have to say, for an independently produced, small, relatively short film, it's not even an hour long with the credits, this is quite an impressive feat, what they've managed to pull off. Because they've got some really famous individuals here, famous at least to the genre. Akira Takarada is in it, for example. And the special effects and technical stuff, it's all very impressive. There's some very nice cinematography of the statue, both when it is in place, when it's the actual statue that we all would recognize, and when it's up and moving around. Never once does it look like it's not a giant statue slowly walking through a city. It looks about as genuine as you can get. And again, for a smaller production with a smaller budget, and that's a small budget by Japanese economy standards, mind you, the fact that it looks that good is really impressive. Granted, the statue doesn't move around that much. It's kind of comparable to how much Shin Godzilla moves around, in that the torso and the arms are fairly static, as is the head, but the feet, when we see them, they move. Otherwise, it's just holding this position with its hands like this. But again, the fact that it looks like a real giant statue that's walking around is quite impressive. And of course there are other elements of cinematography I can point to, such as an extended sequence somewhere in the middle that's styled kind of like a silent film, that's meant to be taking us back to the 1930s, when, well, I don't want to get into spoilers, but that's a very highly stylized sequence, and again, it feels very authentic to the idea of a silent film. That portion itself could almost be a short film in its own right, really. And the music is pretty interesting too. There's a lot of atmosphere in the music, because we're dealing with something. Obviously, you have a statue moving around. That's a supernatural event. Whatever the cause of it is, when a solid statue is moving around, it is supernatural. And that requires supernatural music to accompany it. And the music really does a good job. You can get a taste of it in the trailers with that chanting number when you listen to it. That's what opens the movie, actually. And the music, I mean, if there's a release of that soundtrack, I would listen to it. It's really, really good music, really compelling music. And of course, there are good performances here. It's a very grounded sort of thing, because the framing is sort of like the characters are supposed to be regular everyday people within the film industry. So they're kind of acting like they're not actors in a way. It's hard to explain, I guess. You understand it when you see it, though. And again, there are some familiar faces in there from other examples of the genre. So it's all very neat to see those characters show up, or just watch the actors performing and reacting the way you would probably expect if you saw a statue moving around. There are one or two performances that are not quite up to par with the others. Like, they're kind of hemming it up a little, I suppose, but they don't stick around for too long. So in most regards, the movie is quite impressive, but there is one thing that bothers me, and that is, I'm not sure I understand what the movie was trying to say. Because it was definitely trying to say something. There are multiple soliloquies, if you will, throughout the movie, which make it very clear it's got a message. One of the speeches is actually all about how kaiju movies and sci-fi movies, and heck, the sci-fi genre in general, and fantasy and whatnot, are all about conveying message. They're a great way to convey messages, especially during certain times of turmoil. And so it's clear that the Great Buddha Arrival does have a message. And the message seems to be spelled out somewhere towards the end of Act 2. And I understand what was being said, but the confusing part for me is I don't know how that ties in to the ending. Without getting into spoilers, the ending seems to contradict the message that is being purveyed up to that point. And to be clear, it's quite possible that I am the one who is missing something. I don't necessarily know that much about Buddhism, so maybe there is some sort of Buddhist tenet which, if I were told about it, if I had it explained it to me, and I related it back to this movie, it would click and I would go, oh, that's what it was saying. Or maybe I am misreading what I think the message is about. I honestly don't know. I just know that after only one viewing, and viewing it with the knowledge that I have, I'm not sure I completely understand what the Great Buddha Arrival is about, or I don't understand what it's trying to say. That being said, though, I understand exactly what it is. The Great Buddha Arrival, when you get right down to it, is a love letter to the tokusatsu genre. And it's a passionately made one, too. You could actually say that the fact that it exists at all is miraculous. It's paying homage to this movie that has been lost and no one is ever going to see, barring some sort of miracle. But without that original movie, all the things we enjoy about the genre, all the suit acting, all the cinematography, all of that stuff, either wouldn't exist or it would be very different from how we know it. So it's drawing attention to this film that some people may have never even heard of before. And in doing so, paying tribute to everything that came after it as well. That is undeniably a major part of the function of this movie. Full disclosure, immediately following my first viewing of The Great Buddha Arrival, I wasn't really sure that I did like it, because I didn't understand what it was saying, and as of this review, I still don't. But I want to understand it. I want to figure it out. And I'd be willing to do so. If I can ever get my hands on a copy that I can see again, and I can learn a bit more about the behind the scenes, and I can figure out more of what it's saying, who knows where my opinion might evolve to. At the moment, though, I can say this. I don't understand The Great Buddha Arrival, but I definitely respect it. And I respect the people who made it, and I respect the effort they put into it. And perhaps that's the most important thing of all. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Kaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.